Amanda, how have you arrived at these growth projections as opposed to using other scenarios? And if you could also back us up and tell us what growth projections historically have we considered and outgrown?
Through the Chair, I suppose it's worth reiterating that the future urban land supply strategy is a component of a greater strategy, I suppose, the Auckland Plan. So the trajectory point started in the Auckland Plan. So the assumptions that were adopted in the Auckland Plan are the starting point for this strategy. So in effect, that's the path dependency. So in this strategy, we have taken those assumptions that were adopted in the Auckland Plan and applied them. I suppose the broader question, which is not really one for me to ask and answer in this role for this strategy, is whether or not you have different scenarios as a part of a future Auckland Plan. But this strategy, I just want to reaffirm, takes the assumptions from the adopted Auckland Plan in 2012.
Thank you.
I think it's also important to say this plan assumes we've got a long record now of forecasting lower than actually occurs, so we need to learn from that. But if all this does is signal when this land would be available and when the investment would be made. If there was a slowdown because of policy shift or global events or whatever, then clearly both us and government and others who would invest would slow down with that, because the market isn't going to be ready to build anyway if the pressure stops. So I think you can be confident that we would accommodate a slowdown. The main thing is we're planning for what we're expecting, I think. So.
Thank you. Look, I'm aware that some questions are actually comments and we haven't moved the motion, so I'd like to put it on the table. I'll move it. If I have a second, and the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Cashmore, thank you. And can I just address the gaps? We've got a couple of gaps, so I appreciate Councillor Quack's offering to do this work, and Councillor Newman, thank you, along with myself and the Independent Māori Statutory Board member, Leanne Namani. Thank you, Leanne. We've got a couple of gaps there.
Happy to put my hand up.
Councillor Walker, thank you. Do we have one more? And Councillor Cooper? I've got a full house. Can I leave it at Councillor Cooper?
One more.
And thank you.
Inside straight.
It's a good team. And just on that note, members, I consider this as a decision of this body and not of local boards, and I support the recommendation of the staff that it be decided entirely by this body. I don't think it's appropriate that local boards are involved at this stage, and if you look at the agenda, they have been involved quite deeply up to date. We had some from memory, I think 4 or 5 boards represented at our workshop on this. There have been briefings with boards and clusters, I believe, and the dialogue continues. But ultimately, the decision-making rests with this body here, this planning committee, and the governing body members. So I've got a full house there. Appreciate that. And now I'll go to question or comment from Councillor Newman.
A question at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my questions now relate to the public engagement process from para 30 in the report. And we're talking about what appears to be a sort of hybrid consultation where we're talking to those people who have previously participated in 4 public meetings. And then we're going to have, well, obviously we're going to advertise it through the Shape Auckland website. Are we also going to be contacting the submitters that provided evidence to the IHP on 016, 017? Because there were more than just land developers. And it would seem to me that in relation to all of those locations, that they were quite contested, and that there'll be obviously the land developers that wanted to submit, and there'll be other people that did submit as well to the IHP. Are we going to make contact with them?
We can. I mean, I can confirm that, but get to you later, but we're definitely contacting the people that made submissions to the current future urban land supply strategy, so the previous round of consultation. But we can certainly look into adding those people as well that made submissions to the unitary plan relating to this topic.
And just one follow-up, Mr. Chair, I don't want to labour the point, but the recommendation is to establish a deliberations panel. Is that deliberations panel, are we going to have a hearing as well, or we're just going to receive the submissions and have an in-house debate about it and come up with some position in relation to the proposed sequence? I mean, is there going to be a forum for the submitters to come and reflect back and provide additional information supplementary to their written evidence or written submissions?
Amanda?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're not intending to have formal hearings. It'll be a process of the deliberations panel considering the feedback and bringing that feedback and recommendations back to the planning committee.
Could you recount when we undertook the first strategy, how we undertook the process of engaging with Aucklanders at that time?
So the process was almost the same as this. Have your say events, inviting feedback, and we also had information on websites, so we use social media as well, and the feedback was collated, summarised, and in the case of the local board feedback, verbatim comments given to the panel. We took the panel through the feedback systematically, and the panel recommended amendments back to the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Newman?
Well, I mean, I wasn't involved in the first round, Mr. Chair, but it seems to me that the local boards are going to come and present to the panel. Is that correct? The local boards will all be invited?
Amanda, I don't believe it's about having a hearing. That would be a hearing.
No.
So we will, I think it's the pattern pretty much equal to before, which we had very positive feedback on from those in the north, west and south and a lot of others. And it would be written material, so we'll receive written feedback from parties, including local boards, and the panel will consider that written feedback and also the advice of staff in the staff having considered that feedback. Councillor Lee.
My question relates to the executive summary, and I think it's very important because there seems to be a little bit of blurring between the Auckland plan, the spatial plan for Auckland, which is its legal name, and the unitary plan, which is the very important RMA plan. Now, as I understand it, the 400,000 new homes didn't come out of the Auckland plan, but out of the unitary plan, given the million scenario. I'm concerned that we, in getting on with our work, factor in the council's own evidence that the household formation rate is likely to be closer to be 3.1 than the 2.4 preferred by the unitary plan panel. Having 2.4 meant that you're required to make even more land available for separate houses. I grew up in a household of 7, colleagues to my left and right, 11 and 6 respectively. I don't believe that those levels have changed that dramatically if you look out into the real world, and therefore we have to be careful and rigorous in terms of the data we are working with, lest we make the costs of this infrastructure or projected costs even more frightening than they are, and I agree that they are. I just would like a little bit more rigour on this basic data. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had two specific questions around townships of Kimu and Warkworth. If I could just direct the officers' attentions to page 65, some figures on page 65 compared to some figures on page 55.
Yeah, our agenda.
Oh, sorry, yeah. I think that's page 23
Oh, 23.
and 13, sorry. Of your
So you're looking
document.
at, on 65 is the original strategy
Yep.
of 15?
Yep.
And you're reconciling those with those on which page, councillor?
On our agenda 55,
On-
Mr Chair.
65 and 55?
Yeah. So just so I'm clear on my own understanding, for example, it says there, it's got some figures there for Kimu and Huapai sitting at 9,200. Are you all right?
Sorry, we're struggling a bit to find
mate?
that.
Okay, all right.
yeah.
Okay.
We'll do a catch-up here. So, members, we're looking at page 65, which is the current strategy that we confirmed some time ago.
Yes.
And we're reconciling with page 55
So that,
of the strategy as well.
The one says 6
Okay.
to 7.
I think that on your document that might be page 23 and 13. So the question is just around, first one around Kimu Huapai Riverhead. It says dwellings 8,140 to 9,200. Then when I go back to page 55 and I just look at the same figures, they're lower, right? So that's the gist of my question. Why are they lower? And related to that is Warkworth. Warkworth on page 65, the number isn't actually shown, but I've been working to a growth figure of 22,000 there. That's kind of our community's understanding. And when I go back to page 55, we're looking at a figure more around 7,500. So have they actually dropped, or am I misreading the information?
Through you, Mr Chair, if I could deal with the Warkworth one, the 22,000 figure is people. 22,000 people translates to a dwelling figure of around 8,000 dwellings. And with the Kimu Huapai Riverhead figure there in the two tables, you've picked up an anomaly there. That is incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Should
that's
it
just
be a
an
higher
anomaly.
figure, do you think? Or,
So that's in the current future urban land supply strategy, and the figure that's in the report for Kimu Huapai is the most up to date and will be put into the new revised future urban land
Okay.
supply strategy.
Well, thank you very much. If I can just clarify for Warkworth there, because I was under understanding it was 22,000 new houses and 55,000 new people. You're saying that's incorrect? You're saying it's 8,000 new houses.
So that whatever the figure in the current report, so it'll be around 8,000 dwellings in Warkworth, and times by 2.5, whatever the per household figure we're using is, gets you the total number of people in Warkworth, including the current resident population. So in the Auckland plan, it talked about 20,000 people, but with the additional future urban areas that have been added in the unitary plan, there's provision for more dwellings, which means more people.
Right.
So that's where that sort of 22 upwards comes from.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. Keen eye for the detail. That's good to have around the table. Appreciate that. So, members, I've moved it. Just speaking briefly, I probably won't dwell on the funding issues, but because I think they've been well canvassed by Councillor Clow and the Mayor, and they are significant. They are phenomenal challenges. So this body of work builds on the huge amount of work we've landed or coming into land finally, hopefully, the Auckland Unitary Plan, subject to court appeals and the Higher Environment Court. But it's it's no silver bullet. This is another very important cog in the wheel, and there are some more cogs that we need to sharpen up on. But what this brings to Auckland for the first time, I think, is it confirms a 30-year pipeline of land supply that we've never had before. There's never been a plan like this before. This helps alleviate the lurching from the anywhere, any time, at any cost response that Auckland has suffered from. And I think over the decades I've been living in Auckland and reflecting now with the knowledge that I've built up, that's cost us quite dearly not planning for Auckland's long future. What is critical in this body of work is that it has wrapped around it a very stringent monitoring program, and we will be seeing those numbers flowing through 6 monthly and annually just to see where we're sitting, updating the information, and that monitoring program that will allow us to trigger early release, later release, and we can do it in a nuanced way. So that is a critical component of this. Here we're seeing Auckland Unitary Plan plus Future Urban Land Supply Strategy. If we focus on the dwellings, and I take the point of Councillor Hulson, it's extremely important that we don't just focus on dwellings, but if we look at the dwelling numbers, we're looking at around just over 420,000 feasible dwellings. They are only enabled if we can close those funding gap issues. Short term, 4 billion, long term, heading towards 20 billion that we're hearing today. This provides overall significantly improved integration that was lacking prior, and it makes it also a lot clearer to those that own land on the outskirts. It makes it a lot clearer to those that are our own infrastructure providers, NZTA, Auckland Transport, but also to other infrastructure providers like electricity, energy transmission, Transpower, local connectors like Vector, Mercury, etc. Not forgetting government institutions themselves, and I think Councillor Lee, you made that point, government institutions primarily in the health and education sector, who obviously, who have in the past, struggled to plan for their education infrastructure and health infrastructure in Auckland. So we go from 11,000 in the current Future Urban Land Supply Strategy up to 15,000. We haven't talked much today about the 1,700 hectares that we're identifying this time round that we didn't identify in the first time in the current strategy around the rural settlements, the coastal settlements. That's been highlighted. We've picked that up and we've made some accommodation in those areas, again with triggers. It's all about sequencing. This is no helter-skelter release of land. So members, I think we've come a long way. We've got another little journey to make, and that is to check this off with our communities finally, take their feedback and land this Future Urban Land Supply Strategy in the next couple of months. Where I started, I commended our staff, and I really want that to be echoed back to all the staff, all the CCOs, NZTA as well, beyond Council of course, AT, Healthy Waters, and I know a lot of those people are here today, and you can be proud of the work that you've brought here. I'm extremely proud of the in-depth analysis that all of our teams have given. There might